Good morning, Ed here from Crystal Clear Aquatics, and today I am doing another pond revisited. This is a pond that Dave and I built a couple of years ago now. I think I say this on a lot of my jobs, but this one really does stand as probably my favourite. I think it's about the most complex pond that we've done and the most intricate. So again, it's always lovely to come back and to see how these things are settling down. And today we've got a lot of work to do on this job. So there was always an existing pond here, and this was a job where we were redesigning, reshaping, increasing the volume and the size of the pond dramatically. Hello guys. And then adding the additional seating area here beside the pond. There used to be an old, very raised sort of rockery cascade that was built up over here. An enormous old school kind of black tank filtration system that was just sat on the side that was in full view. So this has really transformed the whole pond. I was particularly keen with the bridge here and how we were able to do that. It worked very nicely. But today, as well as visiting the pond, we've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of fish in the pond which are very dark in colour. And although the pond is clear, with the netting on, they're not immediately obvious. And my client Helen would like to introduce a few more goldfish and get rid of some of these darker fish. There's also a lot of rudd in here as well that we're going to try and hook out. So today we're going to drain the pond down to this lower level, perhaps retaining a foot or so of water, so it's easier for us to hook out the fish. And then we'll net out a lot of the fish and we'll put them into a separate holding tank where it's easier to view them, so that my client can decide which ones she'd like to keep and which ones are going to go. I mean, look at the shoal of baby rudd over there. Lovely to see, but it would be nice to have some more colourful fish in here. And then the fish that are going, we're going to put into a holding tank in the back of the van and run them up to a water gardens locally, where they'll be rehoming the fish. Again, this system is being filtered with an Awaza Screenmatic 2, 140,000. We've got one pump down here, which you can see, which is providing flow for the filtration system, and a second pump, which is purely and independently for the stream. The return for the filtration system is at the opposite end of the pond, submersed underwater, so we've got a decent flow of water and proper circulation. It's lovely to come and see the marginal plants and how they're doing. It's not often that you can keep plants successfully with large koi, but having these retained marginal zones like this, where there's just very shallow water above the top, you can see we've got maybe an inch or even less of water, so they're just submersed, and that means that the big koi actually can't get into contact with the plant, and we'll leave them alone. But it provides just a little bit of interest in the pond and a nice bit of colour. Very nice. So Dave and I are going to go and get the equipment. We've got some big tanks that we have to go and set up, and a lot of water to pump out, so we'll have to start emptying the pond and get going. We've got a guest appearance from Dave. The team's back together again. Morning, Dave.
Morning.
So he's just putting up the frame pool into which we'll be depositing a lot of the fish, because it'll be easier to get a good look at the fish in this container with a lighter background than it will be in the pond. And then from there we can hook the fish out and run them up to our holding tank in the van. It's nice to see some plants and foliage in a koi pond. Most people associate koi ponds or carp ponds as very sterile, kind of stark environments. No livestock, just clear water, and that's lovely, and it's a great way of kind of exhibiting your fish. But it's nice to make a feature out of it, and I think it's lovely to see some foliage in a pond just to kind of soften the edges, provide a bit of interest, and actually it really does help to encourage wildlife. Again, even though this is a fish pond, and obviously there's going to be a lot less wildlife associated with a fish pond than you'll have just in a wild natural pond, but we're still getting, and even with a net across the pond, we're still getting loads of damselflies and water beetles and boatmen and skaters and things in the pond. Frogs earlier this year spawned in here, which is fantastic. Now, having a net across the pond sometimes can cause issues, particularly with dragonflies, because it stops them from getting into the water and stops the emerging dragonflies from being able to leave the pond. But this is a really, really good net. Very, very large holes here, look, which a dragonfly can get through quite comfortably. And it also allows the plants to grow through without pressing up against the net and growing sort of contorted. So this is a really, really good heron deterrent, and I think having these larger holes, this side's not quite as big, and this is going to be replaced for the larger net later on in the autumn. Now, of course, it's not going to catch all of the fine leaves in autumn, so we will end up putting across a finer net just for the autumn months. But this is there as a bit of safety. Herons have been an issue, and my client is very keen to hang on to as many of her fish as she can. So the net has been a necessary precaution. It doesn't take very long to empty the pond out. So we've got down to the deeper section here where all the fish have been corralled into one group, so it's easier to hook them out. See how adept I am at catching some of these guys. So obviously I'm going to get a mixture of fish, some of which we're going to want to hang on to and some of which we're going to want to take away. There we go.
A few in there.
Mm-hmm. And into the pool they go. There we go. So it's just deep enough that they're going to be okay for a couple of hours in the pool, especially with the aerators going. But it's just an awful lot easier now to get a really good look at the fish with this lighter background in the shallower water, and then a little bit easier to catch them without any other obstacles in the pond, like the pumps and the pipe work and lily pots, etc. Right, pass me up that one. Thank you. Some beautiful, beautiful markings on these mirrors. Look at this. Lovely kind of iridescent greeny colour. No, honey, you're not going to have a sniff. Off you go. That's all of the fish removed that are unwanted. We've done one trip to the water gardens. We've got a few more of the smaller mirror carp in the tank at the moment. We're filling this pond back up from the pop-up bowser. You can see how handy these things are. Fantastic. Makes this sort of job so much easier. And then we've got to go and tackle a second pond at the bottom of the garden with a load more rudd. So this is the second pond that we're going to hook out some fish from. This is a lovely wildlife pond which we relined. Again, we made it a little bit deeper in the process and we re-edged and put the marginal zones all the way around the pond. And again, there's quite a few rudd in the pond. This is going to be a lot more of a challenge. We're not going to drain the pond down here. We're just going to hope that we can herd the fish up into the shallows and get a big scoopful out with a bigger net. But it's lovely having the fish pond at one end of the garden and this nature pond at the other end. the dynamics of a pond like this, a static still pond with plants, is very, very different. Again, it's going to take a few seasons for this pond to really establish. But already there's a lot of visiting wildlife, which is lovely. There we go, you can just about see a shoal of the rudd cruising around here. Now the idea was with this pond was to have a few sort of dither fish, that if the heron comes down, he can come along and feed to his heart content in this pond and leave the main pond well alone. But it doesn't seem to have been very successful in hooking out fish from this pond either. It's lovely to see how these plants have been establishing. A lot of these plants were reclaimed from a pond that I emptied out a year or so ago, and they're coming on nicely. The reed mace here has spread. It's sent a lot of runners, so we've got a lot of new shoots popping up, but this year there's not been any burrs, there's not been any of the typical kind of bulrush on them, so hopefully next year, now it's established itself, there'll be a bit more of that. But this pond's a real picture in the spring with the marsh marigolds in flower. And lovely to see it looking so clear, despite it being static, no filtration whatsoever, and with fish in. And that's testament to the plants and just the sheer volume of water. Bigger ponds like this are a lot more stable. So once you achieve a good balance in a pond, it tends to remain so. It'll still go through seasonal changes, spring algae blooms, and it does require blanket retreatments here and there. But on the whole, it's pretty maintenance free. So, we're only going to get probably one shot of this. The base of the net is weighted down. So all you need to do is to stand there, say here, fishy, fishy. Do that again. We haven't been massively successful with the rudd just yet, but look at this gorgeous dragonfly. Just rescued from the water. He submersed himself and got his wings wet. Well, that was reasonably successful. I reckon we've hooked out in total about 40, maybe approaching 50, including the babies, with a rudd. Very difficult though without droning a pond trying to hook out fish, especially in a pond as big as this. And really you only get a couple of opportunities to try and hook out a few before they bolt and go to ground. Not easy, but a good opportunity to show you some beautiful rudd. These are one of my favourite pond fish, and it's not often you see them out of water like this, where you can really appreciate how broad-bodied, how deep-bodied they are, and the beautiful colours of the fins and the scales. A lovely fish. More heron resistant than a brightly coloured goldfish, so a great pond fish if you want to have something which behaves more like a wild fish. If you've got clear water, you can see shoals of them just kind of cruising around. They breed quite happily in a pond. I mean, they can be prolific if you're feeding, then they can overpopulate a pond. So it's always best to try and treat it as a wild pond and just let them sort of forage for themselves or feed sparingly. Lovely, lovely fish. So we'll go and get rid of these and put these back in the tank with the other batch of rudd we caught, and then back to the water gardens to go and rehome them. Well, that's the end of a long day. Pond's a little bit cloudy now. That will settle and clear again over the next few hours. And we've reduced the population of the fish probably almost by half. And what's left, of course, now is significantly more colourful. Should make the pond look a little bit brighter, and there's a little bit more room now in the future to add some more colourful fish without overstocking the pond. It's always a real treat coming back to ponds that I've built. I'm fortunate that this one, Dave and I come back regularly to do maintenance and servicing, so it's always nice to see this. But that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Ed from Crystal Clear Aquatics, and I'll see you in the next pond.